Welcome to Leveraging Social Media to Turbocharge Your Economic Gardening Efforts. This webinar will be presented by R.T. Kutiala. Ms. Kutiala is the Director of Marketing at GIS Planning. Ms. Kutiala brings over a decade of marketing and product management experience in the technology space with a focus on online advertising and social media. Before GIS Planning, Ms. Kutiala drove product strategy and led community management initiatives across various social networks. She is the co-author of the book Regional Wealth Creation in the Innovation Economy and has worked for the United States Chamber of Commerce and the San Francisco Global Trade Council. Ms. Kutiala has an MBA from San Francisco State University and is a passionate social media and end-user advocate.
Thank you for that introduction, and thank you everybody for attending this session. For those of you who are not really sure if social media is relevant to you or if you are not sure how to get started with it, we already have a introduction to social media webinar. The link to that webinar is here. You will be getting access to these PowerPoint slides, and so you can certainly check that out later. I would highly encourage that, as it really sets the stage for why economic development organizations should be involved with social media. So now we're going to talk a little bit about understanding what economic gardening really is, and then how you can leverage social media to really impact your economic gardening efforts. I think the concept of economic gardening or gardening is very apt for both of these separate things, because with economic gardening or with social media, you really have to do a lot of nurturing in order to be successful. So with economic gardening, you have to really nurture your local assets, and with social media, you have to nurture your relationships with your customers or partners, etc. The stage that I would like to set for you is that you already know how to do a lot of these things. You have a good grasp of marketing and communication fundamentals. What I would like to provide you with is a way to understand how to apply those fundamentals to these new and emerging concepts. So, both of these concepts are relatively new and cutting edge, and I would propose this quote as a basis for thinking about these topics. Success in the new economy requires that a whole array of institutions, universities, schools, firms, local governments, and economic development agencies be willing to work in new and often uncomfortable ways. Social media in particular can be very uncomfortable for many people and institutions alike, particularly with policy limitations and perhaps a lack of exposure. Even for me, as involved as I am with social media, I can tell you that it's always a little bit uncomfortable to put yourself out there in such a public way. But I hope to convince you that it is absolutely worth the effort, and that in fact you simply cannot afford to not engage on these platforms. So let's talk a little bit about economic gardening and what that really means. The U.S. Small Business Administration defines economic gardening as an innovative, entrepreneur-centered economic growth strategy that offers balance to the traditional economic development practice of business recruitment. The concept was seeded in Littleton, Colorado, as you can see on our map here, by economic developers Chris Gibbons and Jim Woods. Essentially what it is the focus of economic development on business retention and expansion efforts versus attraction, and on enabling local business ecosystems to flourish, particularly with a focus on high-growth companies. These companies are often called gazelles or second-stage companies for their accelerated growth or potential for growth. They're often characterized by revenues from at least $1 million to up to $50 million, and have employees of about 10 to 100 people. While that is quite a wide range, the core characteristic of these companies lies in their intention and likelihood for growth, as these companies are most likely to result in the highest number of jobs for the local economy, essentially the biggest bang for the buck for your development efforts. However, the concept of economic gardening applies well to companies beyond that range, and is intended to focus on creating a healthy local business ecosystem in your community. There are three main ingredients to nurturing local businesses. Economic gardeners strive to provide access to information, either free or low-cost information. This information can consist of business information like market analysis, industry trends, or access to databases. It can consist of GIS information like available sites and buildings in your community, plotting businesses and demographics, consumer expenditures, label forces on a map, and we'll talk about some free resources that GIS planning provides for businesses and economic development organizations. Information can also consist of training information, access to seminars or online webinars that can provide training to companies in order to help them grow. The second piece of economic gardening efforts consists of infrastructure, like quality of life. This can consist of parks, open spaces, local initiatives, free events, fundraisers, arts festivals, things of that nature. And then also intellectual infrastructure, like institutional educational resources, perhaps through college relationships. And then finally, and perhaps the most important component of economic gardening, is connections, and providing connections that will help businesses succeed. And this is perhaps the most important one for social media in order, for example, to provide access to qualified and relevant talent. And I'll talk a little bit about how businesses are already doing that. But it can also include industry clusters, synergistic companies, relationships with peers, and definitely direct access to customers. So that was a quick introduction to economic gardening. I wanted to kind of race through that so that we could really focus on what it is that you can do with social media to really turbocharge those efforts. You have here, what we're going to talk about here are some untapped and free business resources that could really be valuable for both your efforts as an economic development organization as well as for the efforts of your businesses. If you've watched the introduction to social media, for example, you know that both economic development organizations and small, medium businesses are actively leveraging social media to connect with their audience and to reach their business goals. These strategies apply equally well to market not only your organization, but really to promote your local businesses. So, I would like you to think about all of these resources in both how they can help you market your organization as well as how it can help you promote your local businesses. So we'll start with LinkedIn. One of the first things that organizations can do to create a presence on LinkedIn is to create a company profile. As you can see here, Leprino Foods has a profile on LinkedIn, and one of the things that LinkedIn has now enabled is a social feature that allows people to follow companies of interest to them, which is a really great example of how Twitter is impacting communication models. So even if you're not really interested in Twitter or really don't care about having a presence on Twitter, it will be impacting your communication models going forward, and it will be impacting your marketing efforts going forward. And so, this is one concept that you really should get familiar with and learn how to leverage. So here, for example, I think what's key is that Leprino Foods has 143 followers, so they know that these are people who have essentially opted into their marketing. For business, this could well be a very passionate hire in the future, or a potentially warm lead for their business. As an example, here's an example of where we had a warm lead for our business, somebody that was talking about a good website GIS system and asking about something specific to cost. It's a conversation that I would have never come across unless I was active in these group discussions on LinkedIn. And so that's a second recommendation, that you should really actively leverage group discussions. It was a great opportunity for me to contact somebody directly and provide them with the information that they were seeking, really educating them about the product that they were interested in. Facebook is also a really great social media property. I think it's going to be the most important social media property in the foreseeable future, basically because of the scale of Facebook. There's, it's growing at a very rapid pace and has a scale that's incomparable to other social media properties, at least.